السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. أما بعد، فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، الرحمن الرحيم، مالك يوم الدين. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم، صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد. اللهم بارك على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما باركت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد. Welcoming everyone to another live presentation of the commentary on Sahih Bukhari. We are still on the Kitab Bada-ul Wahy, that is the commencement of revelation, and we are dealing with the section that talked about the conversation between Herakl and Abu Sufyan radiallahu ta'ala anhu. So we reached the section where we are trying to explain the content that relates to the admission of Herakl in the presence of his subjects, their reaction, and the allegation that if Herakl actually had such a positive opinion of the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, then why did he wage war against the Muslims? We have mentioned to the point that uh, Herakl did not actually want to wage war, and it is obvious from his actions and reactions. But politically, when someone is a king, he is many a time obliged to follow the will of the people because he is a king and he cannot always follow his own will. Therefore, we will be getting more understanding of the situation that Heracles found himself in and the type of effort he made in order to help the situation, even though he did not openly declare his state of mind, but his action and reaction were quite evident. Now, I'll be taking from this spot. फिर कत नज़र इससे जब हम हेराकुल के उन जंगियों की हालत पढ़ते हैं तो देखते हैं कि वो मुसलमानों के मुकाबले पर कभी नहीं निकला. Now, the allegation we were talking about is that he actually sent some soldiers to fight against the Muslims, most prominently in the Battle of Tabuk. But according to what we see in history, we realize that Heracles himself, being a great conqueror, did not actually step out to face the Muslims in battle. Now, there would have been a reason behind it. He was a great conqueror, and he actually went to Byzantine out of the success of the conquest he was having. He was having the success against great nations and against the most formidable nations of the time. He just had a success over them, and that was the Persian Empire. So someone who had already conquered the great nation, the great Persian Empire, how could he just be in fear or be in awe, not to even step out to face the Muslims who were considered to be very weak or the weakest nation during that period in time? Now we continue. Gazwa Tabuk की असली वजह ये थी कि रूमी बड़ी लश्कर के साथ हमला करने की तैयारी कर रहे थे. Uh, the basic issue behind the Battle of Tabuk was that the Romans were already preparing a huge soldier to go on the conquest. मगर जब आप सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम वहां पहुंचे तो कोई लश्कर मुकाबले पर न निकला. So in the initial stage there was a huge uproar, or there was a huge rumor there was a rumor of a huge contingent of soldiers from the Romans that are already gathered. But when the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam reached the spot where the battle was to take place, No soldier, not even a single soldier, did they meet there to fight. और मबार के लड़ाइयों में भी हेराकुल हमेशा पीछे रहा. Now, in the battle of Tabuk, they didn't meet any soldier. The soldiers didn't come out to face them in battle. Likewise, in other subsequent battles that took place with the Romans, Heracles himself did not step out to face the Muslims. मुकाबला के लिए कभी नहीं निकला. He never stepped out to face the Muslims. इसके कई वजूह हो सकते हैं. There could be many reasons for this or many perspectives to this. मगर सबसे बढ़कर वजह यह है कि वो आप सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम का मुकाबला करना चाहता था. सॉरी, वो आप सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम का मुकाबला नहीं करना चाहता था. The basic one, that is the most prominent reason that is apparent, was that he did not want to face the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam in battle. और लड़ाई से उम्दम पहलू तही कर रहा था, and he was always looking for a way, that's a good way in order to escape the battle itself. चुनाचे इंसान मरिखुन ने भी इसको मल सॉरी मुलजिम गिरदाना और कहा है कि एक बाइस उन शिकस्तों का खुद हेरकल है. Out of it, even the Christian historians now put a lot of blame on him, that the reason that Heracles himself, was one of the basic reason for the Romans or the Christians losing the battles to the Muslim. Gibbon B. Isco Zoldar Alfazmi Muttahim Kartat. Even Gibbon himself used severe words in order to accuse him, that was to accuse Heracles. और कहता है कि इन जंगों में इसकी गैर मौजूदगी आमदन थी. That is, he was saying that he intentionally did not take part in the war. That was Gibbon, who was a Christian historian. और कहता है कि बजाय इसके कि वो उन मुल्कों को बचाता, उसने खो मखो एक नई बहस चढ़कर तमाम मुल्कों को एक दीनी इंशिकाक में मुब्तला कर दिया था. Then Gibbon was accusing him that instead of taking part in the battle, in the wars, in order to save the territories, on the contrary, he was creating a new concept that actually caused a split in the territory, in a religious split in the nation. That is, uh, Heracles would have used the opportunity. I mean, it was a time that Heracles was supposed to save the nation by going to war and defeat the opponent. But instead of getting into war and defeat the opponent in order to save the territories, he was just creating division in religion by some concept which he was bringing up. And now, what's the concept? यानी ये बहस के मसीह में दो मुख्तलिफ तबीयतें हैं, saying that there are two separate nature inside the Christ Jesus, Nasuti or Lahuti. This word Nasut and Lahut is a theological terminology that indicates the human state and the divine state. So we talk of the humanity and the divinity. All Mashiach ek hi hai, and the will is only one, yani ilahi, divine, meaning there is only one will, that is the will that comes from divine, and there is a separate state of humanity and a separate state of divinity. But in order not to create an uproar, he made this inside Jesus. That is, Jesus was bearing two components in him, the human state and the divine state. Now, why all this drama will be, I mean, why was he creating these situations? It will be explained in front. So this is just a quotation of where they were referring to the blame that were the blames that were put on Gibbon. Ye beskatan be vajanati. This argument is actually not useless. It's actually not without purpose. बल्कि वो हज़रत सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम की दावत तौहीद से मुतासिर और हज़रत सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम और आप सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम के इत्तिबा के मुकाबिल पर आमदन आना नहीं चाहता था. The argument he was bringing up wasn't purposeless, and the reality was that he was already there was already the effects of the call to unity of God from the Holy Prophet ﷺ in him, meaning the unity of God the Holy Prophet ﷺ was calling to had already affected him, and he intentionally was avoiding the Holy Prophet ﷺ because he doesn't want to face him in battle. Then Aslim Taslam ki and ki inzari peshgoi ki nata'ij se yaqinan harasanta. Likewise, the warning that was given to him, Aslim Taslam, that is, you only become a Muslim, then your kingdom will be safe, is quite huge. It's having a lasting effect, that's a trembling effect on him. जैसा कि हम अगली हदीस की तशरीह में इस अमर को ज़्यादा वज़ाहत से दिखाएंगे, as we are going to explain this further in the subsequent hadith. इस वक्त के पादरी भी हेराकुल की उन कमजोरियों को महसूस करते थे. The uh, contemporary pastors were also able to notice the weakness that Herakul was having within him that time. चुनांचे अंतोकिया के गिरजे में इससे अपने गुनाहों का एतराफ कराया गया. Therefore, in the cathedral of Antiochia, of Antioch, sorry, in the cathedral of Antioch, they were able to uh, make a kind of display of him admitting his sin, having admission to his sin. मगर इस ज़ाहिरी एतराफ़ ने भी इसके अंदर कोई हकीकी तब्दीली नहीं की. But yet, the apparent admission of his sin does not did not change his inner state, his innate state at that point in time. Meaning, he was quite sure of the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, of the reality, of the truth of the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, even though for political reason and for religious reason of where he belonged, he had to make a kind of admission, admitting that he was the one who sinned, but in reality his mind was very clear about the pathway which he was choosing, but which he had on his mind but was unable to choose. बल्कि इस एतराफ़ के बाद जब मुसलमानों की फ़ौजियों का रुख उस तरफ होता है, तो वो उनके पहुंचने से पहले अंतोकिया छोड़कर कॉन्स्टेंटिनिया पहुंच जाता है. Rather, even when, despite the fact that he had that admission, after the admission, when the Muslims were to face that land area in war, he hastily left Antioch and got back to Constantinople. इसे इस्लामी तारीख की ये रिवायतें ज़्यादा तक़वियत पाती हैं कि वो सल्लम की दावत से दर हकीकत मरगूब था और हक पहुंचाता था. From the history of Islam and the narration that had reached us, it became quite apparent that he was truly in awe of the call of the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, as he actually realized the truth of the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. मगर अपने कौम से डरता था और उनका मुकाबला करने की ताकत नहीं रखता था. But the reality was, he actually had a fear of his own people, because he couldn't just, as the king, he couldn't just admit to the rule of another ruler and put his own nation down. So he had a fear of his own nation and couldn't face them. इस ज़मीन में हेराकुल की आखिर दम तक ये कोशिश भी काबिल तवज्जो है कि उसकी ईसाई रियाया ये मान लें कि मसीह अलैहिस्सलाम की दो अलग अलग तबीयतें थीं. Likewise, we see it up to the end of the life of Heracles, he was making an effort for his people to understand that the Christ alayhi salatu wasalam, was having two separate nature within him. Or ummi ek irada ilahi kam karahata, and therein a single will of God Almighty was working. Or Herakul ka vo inland be kobil gorhe. Likewise, the pronouncement of Herakul can also call for us to ponder. Jo usne cheso artist me Constantinia Punchkar tamam girjum me chaspan Karwayata. That was the edict he issued when he reached Constantinople in the year 638, and made them put those edicts on each and every cathedral, in each and every church. Nez thereafter उसने अपने दब के आदमी छीनकर मुख्तलिफ जगहों में उन्हें Pariak or Bishop Mukarrar Kia. Thereafter, he also took another step, and that was taking people of that had his that were okay or that were in line with his opinion, that were his supporters. He took them and assigned them to different places so that they can be they can represent the Ark of Covenant, and they can also be the bishop over there. I said Nazuk vakt me, yes, Sari Judo Jud Bila Wajanati. In that fragile moment, the effort that he was making, which was actually not in saving the nation from the war at that moment, but was taking other steps that are religious steps, couldn't have been without purpose. बल्कि उसके पीछे एक ऐसी सच्चाई की रूह काम कर रही थी. On the contrary, beneath it, there was a spirit of truth that was working. जिसके अंदर Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam के कलमा La ilaha illallah की दावत की टेस्ट ने एक इत्तरब पैदा कर दिया हुआ था. On what was working, the spirit of truth that was working under him was the kind of trembling state or the awe that the pronouncement of the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that is, La ilaha illallah. There is none worthy of worship beside Allah. There is no deity beside Allah. That pronouncement had created that trembling state within him, that created the awe within the mind of inside the mind of Herakul. वो अपने कौम को नक्तो तौहीद के करीब लाने की कोशिश कर रहा था. Therefore, he was actually, what he was doing was to get a way to bring his people closer to the point of Tawheed, that is oneness of God. You want them to get closer to believe in the oneness of God, and that was the effort he was making. क्योंकि ये ख्याल के मसीह में नसूती और मलकुती तबीयतें और एक मशीयत इलाही कम कर रही थी, तसलीस की निस्बत तौहीद के ज़्यादा करीब है. Because when we look at the idea that there is a human state and there's a divine state in the Christ, and both were working under a single will of God, that particular idea is closer to oneness of God than to Trinity. It's closer to the unity of God as against Trinity. हेराकुल को मुसलमानों के मुकाबिल में तमाम जंगी करतब भूल गए और नमूरी पैदा करने की ख्वाहिश एक दफा मिट गई. Now, the idea of Heracles not being able to face the Muslims in battle had already clarified or had already taken everything completely, had already indicated the basic state of Heracles. और वो आखिरी अय्याम में सिर्फ इस मजहबी ख्याल के पीछे पड़ गया, such that in his latter days, he only, instead of he himself stepping out in order to face the Muslims in battle, all he paid his attention to was that religious ideology he was trying to establish. सिवाय इसके के उसको सल्लम की दावत का रूप और रियाया के गुना के वबल का खौफ दामन गिरता. The only thing that was that he was under the awe of the call of the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Likewise, the kind of fear that was to befall, the kind of trial that was to befall those under its sovereignty out of the sins. Iski or kya makul waja hu sakti hai. What other idea would have been sensible for him not to be able to step out in order to face the Muslims? Agar mehes siyasi agrosti, had it been it was basically political, meaning had it been it was a political objective, तो वो ये अग्रस अपने इस ख्याल को छोड़ने और हर एक फिरका को अपने अपने मजहब के मुताबिक आज़ादी देने से बआसानी हासिल कर सकता था. For political reasons, it would have been very much easy for him. It would have been easier for him to just leave his ideology at that point in time in order to give to unite everybody for that political reason by giving them the freedom of their own personal ideology. That would have been very easier for him. It will have been very easy for him क्योंकि इस तरह वो मुसलमानों के मुकाबले पर तमाम ईसाई फिरकों की हमदर्दी और मदद को अपने लिए खरीद सकता था, because in that way he would have been able to buy the the compassion, the will of all Christian groups to his own side against the Muslims. असली बात यही है कि हेराकुल के ख्यालात तब्दील हो चुके थे. The reality was that the opinion or the ideology of Herakul had already changed completely. ईसाई उलमा की तरफ से उसे बिदअती का लक़ब मिलना तारीख ईसाइयत में एक मशहूर व मारूफ वाक़या है. It is also very much popular that the Christian scholars had accused him of innovation, and they even gave him the tag of being an innovator. Now, the next thing, Wakan ibn Naturi, Sahibu Ilya. We need to talk now about Ibn Natur, who was the uh, government representative or the governor of uh, Jerusalem that time. ये एक बिल्कुल नई रिवायत है जो ज़ुहरी बयान करते हैं. This is a new narration that is a completely new narration that was presented by Zuhri. अबू सुफियान की रिवायत के साथ जिसको हजरत इब्न अब्बास रज़ियल्लाहु ताला अन्हु ने नकल किया है उसका ताल्लुक नहीं. This is not connected with the narration that Ibn Abbas was given on the authority of Abu Sufyan, meaning the section that this statement was brought and what happens thereafter was not connected to Abu Sufyan at all. Abu Sufyan already had his own issue, got the idea, and had everything he was experiencing with he experienced with Herakul, and his own part of the narration had come to an end. Therefore, the next thing that followed was another presentation from Zuhri himself, rahmatullahi alayhi. बज़ाहिर रिवायत के अल्फाज से यही मालूम होता है कि जूरी ने इब्न नौतुर से ये वाक़या खुद सुना. Apparently, it appears that Zuri himself had this particular statement or what he had narrated directly from Ibn Natur himself. जैसा कि तबरी ने अपने तारीख में बसनद इब्न इसाक ये रिवायत नकल की है कि ईसाइयों के एक बिशप ने अब्दुल मलिक बिन मरवान के अहद हुकूमत में ये वाक़या उनको सुनाया. As Tabari explained in his own history book with the chain of narration from Ibn Ishaq, that this particular section, this particular story was actually narrated by a bishop during the reign of Abdul Malik bin Marwan. That was one of the Umayyad kings, meaning it was a moment that the Muslims already had the conquest of Jerusalem. The land of Jerusalem was already under the rulership of the Muslims. So it wasn't something strange that they were able to meet the Christian bishops who narrated that particular section to them. और अबू नाइम ने भी दलाइल नबुवत में यही नकल किया है कि इब्न शिहाब ने अहद मलक के ज़माने में इब्न नतूर से ये वाक़या सुना. Likewise, Abu Naim, who was also one of the great narrators of Hadith, also presented this in the book Dalail Nubuwa. He presented this narration indicating that Ibn Shihab actually uh, had this particular incident that he narrated directly from Ibn Natur during the reign of Abdul Malik. Sorry, this is Abdul Malik. When I was reading the other time, I said Ehdi Malik. That was the kingdom of Abdul Malik, means during the reign of Abdul Malik bin Marwan. इस रिवायत पर यह इंतराज तो नहीं हो सकता कि इब्न नातुर जो कि हेरकुल का दोस्त था, उससे जुहरी ने जो भवन में पैदा हुई कैसे मुलाकात की. Now, there won't be this particular allegation. I mean, there could be an allegation, but the allegation will not be valid. That how was it possible that Ibn Natur, that was a friend of Herakul, was the one who narrated this incident to Zuhri, who was born in the year 52 of Hijrah, in the 52nd year of Hijrah. So Zuhri was born in the 52nd year of Hijrah, and Ibn Natur was a friend of Herakul, which was we would now consider that it would have been very old at that time, because Ibn Natur being a friend of Herakul, and the incident we are talking about are taking place in around 628 AD, which was getting to about 20 years before the birth of of Zuhri. Now, it won't be a valid allegation क्योंकि अब्दुल मलिक का अहद हुकूमत uh, 50 से uh, 82 takta, because the kingdom, I mean, the reign of Abdul Malik started between the 65th year of Hijrah to the 82nd year of Hijrah. इस अरसा में वो शख्स जिसकी उम्र 70-80 बरस की हो, उस शख्स को पा सकता है. Therefore, if जो बावन में पैदा हुआ हो, a man that is of 70 to 80 years of age could actually could actually have a meeting with someone that was born in the year 52 Hijrah. That is, if we consider that at that time Ibn Natur could be around the age of 70 to 80, then at these years between 65 to 86, it is possible for Ibn Natur, being in the age of 70 to 80, to have met Zuhri, who was born in the 52nd year of Hijrah. Zuhri uh, 124 में फौत हुई. Zuhri passed away in the year 124 Hijrah, मगर ये कहा जा सकता है कि ईसाई कलीसिया की तारीख में इब्न नतुर नामी कोई शख्स नहीं गुजरा जो बैतुल मुक़द्दस का हाकिम भी हो. But it can be stated that in the history of the Christian churches, there was no one called Ibn Natur who had been the judge, I mean, the governor of Baitul Maqdas, Jerusalem, who had been the governor of Jerusalem, or Shamke Isayaka Bishop B, and he was also a bishop in Syria, or na Harakul Ilmu Najum ka Mahirta, and they do not consider Herakul as someone who was an astrologist or an astrologer, sorry, or now Usni Maskura Bala Khob Deka, and there is also no documentation of Herakul saying that particular dream, the dream that was mentioned, or Ye Ek Mehes Kesohe. This, according to them, could have been regarded as a mere tale. जिसकी लगवियत इससे ज़ाहिर है कि हेराकुल को ऐसा नादान बतलाया गया है, for which they will have apparently seen Herakul as an illiterate. or someone who wasn't aware of what he was saying, ke ese itna be ilmun nata, such that he doesn't even have the basic knowledge ke Yehud khitna karte hain, that the Jews were performing circumcision. What they are saying is, in the mind of the Christians, or in the idea of the Christians, for the fact that they do not have in their narration that Ibn Natur had been a governor of Baitul Maqdis, Jerusalem, or a bishop in Syria. Likewise, they wouldn't consider that uh, uh, they were not, in their own history, they were not considering Heracles to be an astrologer. Then they would have also considered him to be very illiterate if he wasn't aware of Jews. I mean, of if he wasn't aware of the fact that Jews were used to perform circumcision. क्योंकि ये एक ऐसी बात है जिससे एक ईसाई आलिम तो यकीनन वाकिफ नहीं हो सकता. Because this was a matter that uh, a Christian scholar, I mean, this was just a matter that a Christian scholar wouldn't have been unaware of. इस इंतराज का जवाब ये है कि रिवायत के अरबी अल्फाज मन यख्ततिन मिन हादिहिल उम्मा में हादिहिल उम्मा से मुराद यहूद तो कतन नहीं हो सकते. The response to that particular allegation is that when you look into the Arabic statement, man yaqtatin min hadhihi al-ummah, who are the people within this nation that who are performing circumcision? The word hadhihi al-ummah from this nation that is used clearly does not refer to the Jews. क्योंकि जवाब देने वाले ये कहते हैं लैसा यख्तातिनो इला यहूद. And when you see in the response, the one given response was saying that no one performed circumcision except the Jews. यहूद के सिवा और किसी कौम में खतना नहीं होता. That is, only the Jews were the ones who used to perform circumcision. इस जवाब से मालूम होता है कि हादिहुल उम्मा से उसकी मुराद यहूद नहीं. That make it apparent that the word this nation was not in relation to the Jews. बल्कि mutlak Arab murad hai. On the contrary, it was directly in relation to the Arabs. बाकी रहा ये कि हेराकुल इल्म नजुम से वाकिफ था या उसे कोई ख्वाब आई थी, तो उसके मुतालिक मसीह आसार से इतना पता जरूर चलता है कि वो तो हम परस्त जरूर था, और इंजिल वगैरह से फैलिन निकलने का उसको बहुत शौक था. The idea, I mean, leaving everything aside, the idea that Herakul was well aware of astrology, and that he probably had any dream of such. All these things are just a mere or general ideas that the basic thing that is needed to for us to understand is that Heracule was someone who followed the custom completely and always try as much as possible to bring out the basic points in the Bible, in the New Testament. और इब्न शिहाब की मस्करा रिवायात में ये अल्फाज हैं जो उन्होंने इब्न नातूर की सनद से नकल किए हैं. The statements of Ibn Shihab that he narrated from Ibn Natur is as follows: Wakana Herakul Hazaan. That was the statement. Now, Hazaan जोशी को कहते हैं, लेकिन यंजुरु फिन नुजुम कहकर तखसीस कर दिए है. Now, when we look at the word Hazza, which is something related generally to a specific, I mean, a general field of astrology, then now to bring a particular uh, taxis, an sorry, an emphasis, to lay this particular emphasis, Yanzuru fin nujum, that he used to look into the stars. ke vo ilmu nujum jantata, that he was well aware of astrology, or ye baid nahi ke vo ilmu nujum se be wakifu, then that wouldn't be something strange that Heracule himself was someone who was an astrologist, that is astrologer. He was aware of astrology, क्योंकि पुराने ज़माने में ये इल्म उलमा के दरसी निसब का ज़रूरी हिस्सा था, because in the ancient world, astrology was actually part of the popular course for the scholars, meaning they generally include it in this learning of the schools. So we are indicating two things this time around. They want to remove the idea of soothsaying from Heracule. But being soothsaying is one thing, that is Jyotishi. Being a soothsayer is one thing, which would have been the general word from the general opinion from the word Hazar. But the statement explains it further, Yanzur fin Nujum, which indicates the exclusive state of looking into the star, that is astrology. Now, that means the statement is not referring to Heracule as a soothsayer, but was referring to him as an astrologer. Then the allegation will now will not be valid anymore, because it is not a statement that accuses of Heracule of soothsaying, but it's a statement that talks about he being an astrologer. And astrology is something that was already part of the curriculum of students during the ancient world. So he being an astrologer wouldn't have been something special or something strange in the mind of anyone. Khususan Misr or Iskandaria ki तालीम गाहों में और हेराकुल के तालीम व तरबियत इस्कंदरिया में हुई. Especially this uh, idea of this knowledge of astrology is quite popular, is quite relevant to Egypt and Alexandria, and the training of Heracule took place in Alexandria. Nez मसीही मुस्लिफिन की तारीखों के मुतालिया से इसके एक ख्वाब का भी पता चलता है. Then when we also look into the writings of the Christians, we also get to see another dream of his. Gibbon B is ke parishan khobun ki taraf ishara karta hai. Even Gibbon himself was referring to the fear he had, the panic he had, been in relation to a dream. Or अक सॉरी और अगले कहता है कि उसने ख्वाब में देखा कि किसी ने उसको तख्त से धक्का धक्का देकर नीचे गिरा दिया और उसके सर से ताज उतार दिया. Now, what actually brought the fear to him, according to Gibbon, was the dream that he had that someone shook him and brought him down from the throne and removed the crown on his head. यह ख्वाब मज़कूर ने गालिबन मसीही रिवायत की बिना पर नकल किया है. It is most likely that this historian had brought this dream, had mentioned this dream in relation to Christian narrations. Zuri की रिवायत के एक हिस्सा मजमून की तायीद करता है, and that particular dream itself already supported the narration of Zuhri. नेज़ इस्लामी तारीख से ये भी मालूम होता है कि सल्लम ने इस ज़माने में गस्सान के बादशाह के पास दिहिया कल्बी को खत देकर भेजा था. Likewise, during that period of time, it is also known that the Holy Prophet ﷺ sent a letter to Ghassan, the king of uh, sorry, to the king of Ghassan through Dihiya al-Kalbi. Now, what we are indicating in this issue here is the hadith or the narration are presented as a statement from Zuhri, indicating that uh, Herakul was having fear, was panic due to a dream which he had, and that dream had come through the narration which Zuri received from Ibn Natur. Now, from the side of Gibbon, who was a Christian historian, he also mentioned a particular dream of Herakul. If this dream is considered to have been from the narration of the Christians, and then the fear of Herakul will be justifiable. And if the fear of Herakul is justifiable, then the narration of Zuri would be very much correct, because Zuri was not a contemporary of Herakul. He wasn't there with Herakul. He wasn't even born in the time of Herakul. But he had narrated from a friend of Herakul, who was Ibn Natur, that Herakul had a particular dream that put him to fear. Now we get an evidence of it from the narration of Gibbon, that Herakul actually had a dream that someone shook his throne, brought him down, and removed the crown on his head. A note was just made here that the governor of Gassan was sorry, the head of Gassan was also the governor of Basra. Iska zikr sabika riwayat mi bi achukahe. We've mentioned it in the previous uh, narration. इस रिवायत का आखिरी हिस्सा मजमून भी अकीदतमंदी के इन एहसासात के मुखालिफ नहीं बल्कि मुताबिक है. Now, when we look into this last portion of the narration, we see that it does not go against the idea of someone who has belief. On the contrary, it's in support of it. Jinka is har Herakul ne Abu Sufyan ke samne kia. So the belief that Herakul showed in the presence of Abu Sufyan, the fear he was having goes in line with that particular belief which was apparent in him during the when Abu Sufyan was present in his court. Herakul Katu हम परस्त होना उसका इंजीलुम से फले निकलना उसका उसका डरावनी ख्वाब दिखना और अपने लोगों को नसीहत करना और अमला मुसलमानों के मुकाबले पर खुद न लड़ना, ये बातें ऐसी हैं कि खुद ईसाई मुसन्निफिन ने भी उनका इकरार किया है. Now, the fact that Herakul was someone who follows the general ideology of the people, then being someone who was who always tried to bring out ideas from the New Testament, the fear he had through the dream, and the type of the advices he was given to the people of under his reign that time. Likewise, not being able to step out to face the Muslims in battle. All these shows, I mean, all these are things that are already agreed upon, that are already testified to by the Christian writers themselves. इसलिए इब्न शिहाब की मज़कूरा रिवायत की सिहत में कोई शुबा नहीं रहता. Therefore, there wouldn't be any doubt in the narration that was presented by Ibn Shihab. I mean, there won't be any doubt as per the authenticity of the narration presented by Ibn Shihab. अलबत्ता इब्न नतूर रावी का जो हवाला दिया गया है उसकी शख्सियत का सवाल काबिल तहकीक है. Now, the mentioning of Ibn Natur that came before, that we pointed out before, there will be there will be a necessity to look into the personality, into the personality of that individual. इस नाम की तरकीब तो वो है जो सामी नस्ल अक़वाम की जुबानी के साथ मखसूस है. Now, when we look into the formation of that name, Ibn Natur, we see it to be something that comes from the people of the Samiats. it is specific for them. All Natur Arabi mi Haris Yani Negeban ko Ketihe. So when we look, the word Natur is an Arabic word that it means Haris, that is a guard or a keeper, a gatekeeper. Herakul ke zamanin mi Zakaria Betel Makadas ka Lat Padrita. During the reign of Herakul, Zachariah was the one who was the pastor or the main bishop of Baitul Maqdas, that is Jerusalem. I'm not talking of Prophet Zachariah here, the name of the bishop that time, Zachariah. और ये नाम भी दलालत करता है कि कोई वतनी आदमी ही उस मनसब पर मुकर्रर था. And that indicates that someone who belongs to the nation was the one appointed for the position at that time. Zakaria ke bap ka naam malum nahi ho saka. We couldn't know, we were unable to get the name of the father of that Zachariah. बेशक बैस का बहुत कुछ दारो मदार इब्न नतुर की शख्सियत के मालूम होने पर है. Without much ado, the basic thing that call for discussion here is knowing the personality of Ibn Natur. मगर बैन हम इसमें शुबा नहीं कि उसके कुनिया का शख्स इब्न शिहाब से जरूर मिला. Despite that, something that is quite obvious is that Ibn Shihab had met someone with that appellation. जैसा कि अबू नाइम ने भी दलाइल नबुवत में इब्न शिहाब की ये रिवायत नकल की है. Just like the way Abu Naim had presented the same narration, a similar narration in Dalail Nubuwa. Ilawa izin Ibn Natur की तरफ जो बयान मंसूब किया गया है, apart from that, what was explained in relation to Ibn Natur, what was mentioned in relation to him, इसकी तस्दीक खारिजी कुरान से भी होती है. Then we get some external link that supports that particular narration. चूंकि इस रिवायत में बाज़ ऐसी बातें हैं जो साबिका मुस्तनिद रिवायत की तायद करती है, because we see some other narrations that are that have their own chain and support this particular narration. इसलिए इमाम बुखारी रहमतुल्लाह अलैहि ने इसको बतौर ततिम्मा रिवायत के नकल किया है. Therefore, Imam Bukhari had brought this particular section just to conclude the initial narration he was presenting. एक और अम्र इस रिवायत में काबिल गौर है. Another matter that calls for us to ponder over in this narration is that और ये is that कि हराकुल की तरफ ये कॉल जो मंसूब किया गया है कि मैंने आज रात खत्म करने वालों का बादशाह ख्वाब में दिखा है. That Herakul was saying that he saw the king of those who used to perform circumcision in dream overnight. ये कॉल किसी मुस्लिमान रावी का खुद तराशीदा नहीं हो सकता. This statement wouldn't have been something coined by any Muslim, बल्कि ऐसे शख्स का है जो अहदनामा कदीम व जदीद से खूब वाकिफ है. It can only be a statement from someone who is well acquainted with the Old Testament and New Testament. क्योंकि किताब इस्तिस्ना व मलाकी की नबी वगैरह की किताबों के रू से जिस नबी का इंतजार था उसके मुतालिक ये पेशगोई थी कि वो बादशाह होगा और खितना कराने वालों में से होगा. Because in the book of Deuteronomy and Malachi, the prophet that was prophets, and likewise in the books of other prophets in the Bible, the prophecy was made on the prophets to come that he will be a king and will also be from the nation of those who perform circumcision. खितना हजरत इब्राहिम अलैहिस्सलाम और उनकी जुरियत के लिए अबदी अहद का निशान था. Circumcision is the mark is an eternal mark for the nation of Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam and the generation after him. Jo Allah Ta'ala ne unke sat bandata which Allah the Almighty had made for them, had attached to them. All Bani Israel or Bani Ismail is ke liye maksuste. And these covenants were specific were specifically attributed to the Israelites, to the nation of Israel and Ishmael, that is the Israelites and the Ishmaelite nation. This uh, covenant is specifically for them, for these two nations. But I mean, within that period in time, Bani Israel may say, Nabitu Huterehe, among the children of Israel, prophethood continued. Magar ऐसा कोई नबी नहीं हुआ जो हजरत मूसा अलैहिस्सलाम की मानिद सोइब शरीयत भी हो और Malik yani Badsha bihu, but there was no prophet there was no other prophet who was similar, who was in similitude of Musa alayhi salatu wasalam, who was a lawbearer and also a king. इसलिए उम्मीद इंतजार थी कि एक मलिक खत्तान नबी पैदा होगा. Therefore, they were waiting for a prophet who would be a king. They were waiting for a prophet who would be a king of the people who were performing circumcision. Yani, head wala Badsha Nabi, that is the prophets who will be a king under the covenant. इसी की तरफ Herakul इशारा करता है. It was to it Herakul was referring to the same point. और इस नबी के मुतालिक ये मशहूर था कि वो रोमियो के हाथ से नजात देगा. And there was this covenant, there was a prophecy that was already popular, that he was going to grant freedom to people from the grip of the Romans. This was just a Herakul ko khof hua. That was why Herakul was in awe, was in fear. Or Arkani Sultanate ne usko mashwara diya ke Yahudi katal kara diye jaye. And that was why the Senate of the empire gave him the advice. They gave him the idea of killing all the Jews, ta iske sultanat mahfuz rahe, so that his kingdom shall remain protected. ओकले ने हरकुल की जिस खब का जिक्र किया है उसका मफहूम भी यही है कि उससे उसको यकीन हो गया था कि इसका ताज तख्त उसके हाथ से छिन जाएगा. The meaning that Oakley was the meaning that could be derived from the narration of the dream Oakley brought in relation to Herakul. That is, Oakley said that Herakul had this dream. What can be derived of that dream is that the throne, the crown and throne, will be taken away from Herakul. जो लोग रिवायत मस्कुरा के इस हिस्सा का Oakley के मुस्तकिल रिवायत से मुकाबिल करके जरा तदाब्बुर से काम लेंगे. Whosoever ponders over this narration of Oakley and the narration we are presenting separately, उन्हें और भी यकीन हो जाएगा. Then they will also have this understanding, a clear understanding कि इब्न शिहाब की रिवायत के मजमून में ऐसे कॉलोइन मौजूद है that there is a clear link in this narration to that of Ibn Shihab, जो इसकी सिहत को पाया सबूत तक पहुंचाते हैं, that make it quite authentic. I mean, that lifts it to the point of authenticity. Imam Bukhari rahmatullahi alayhi ने उसे यूं ही सबक मजमू की तायद में नकल नहीं किया. Imam Bukhari did not I mean, that was why Imam Bukhari did not join it with the previous narration that he was presenting. इतनी एहतियात जरूर कर ली है, but he was careful to this level के उसको बतौर ततिम्मा रिवायत दर्ज किया है, that he now brought it as narration that concludes. I mean, he brought it as a content that concludes the main narration. Na ऐसे मुस्तानिद रिवायत के तौर पर जो उनकी शुरुत के मुताबिक हर तरह से यकीनी थुबूत हो. So it wasn't present. It didn't present it as a narration that we have to go under the scrutiny of his way through which he used to present narration, whereas he need to get each and every individual within the chain of narration. रिवायत मुस्कुरा बला में हर कुल की जिस खौफ का जिक्र किया गया है उसके मुतालिक ये इतराज़ भी किया जाता है कि ये असातिर असातिर अवलिन में से एक ऐसा किस्सा है. Now, in the narration that was presented in the as regards to the dream of Heracule, they've also some other people also presented their own allegation that it was just a fable, it was just some tales of the earlier days. जिसको हर कौम ने अपने पेशवा की पैदाइश पर चश्मा किया है, that each and every nation had actually attributed to their ancestors. गौतम बुद्ध के मुतालिक भी यही कहानी सुनी जाती है. They were saying that even tales like this were said of Buddha. और हजरत मूसा अलैहिस्सलाम के वक्त भी फिरौन की तरफ यही जुल्म मंसूब किया गया है. Likewise, in the time of Hazrat Musa alayhi salatu wasalam, this were the type of evil that was attributed to Pharaoh. Hazrat Masih के पैदाइश पर भी मती बब 2 आयत 16 में लिखा है कि हेरो ने बैतलहम के लड़कों को कत्ल कराया. They were saying that in the by the birth of Christ, it was also stated that uh, Her- uh, Herodotus also gave the command that they should kill all male children in Bethlehem. What this allegation is all about is that those people were trying to indicate that the idea or the narration that involves the advice that Heracles should kill all the Jews, they were attributing it to the type of tales that were stated of previous nations. So they presented the example of Gautama Buddha, the time of the birth of Musa alayhi salatu wasalam, that Pharaoh gave the command that all the male children should be killed. Likewise, the one mentioned in the book in the New Testament regarding Herod, Herodotus, that he gave the commandment that all the male children in Bethlehem should be killed. So they were saying that it was just on the same lane. जहाँ तक हजरत मसीह अलैहिस्सलाम की पैदाइश का ताल्लुक है, इस किस्सा के बेबुनियाद होने में कोई शुबा नहीं. As far as that of the time of Christ, there is no doubt that it had no basis. और हमें इस base से क्या वास्ता, and what connection do we even have with that discussion? We it is not, it doesn't concern us in any way. आखिर हेराकुल के मुशीर भी ईसाई ही थे जो हेरा का किस्सा भी यकीनी समझते थे. At the end of the day, we still know that those who were giving advice to Heracles that time were Christians who actually believe in this story of Hero or Herodotus. और इस वजह से उन्होंने मशवरा भी दिया गया कि यहूदी लड़के कत्ल करवा दिए जाएं. And that was why they were giving the advice that they should kill all the male children of the Jews. इस रिवायत से इस्लामी तारीख और उसके रवियों पर जिद नहीं पड़ती. Then the blame of this will not be on the on Muslim narrators or Muslim historians, क्योंकि मुस्लिमान रावी ये नहीं कहते कि हेराकुल ने ऐसा किया, because those narrators, the Muslim narrators, didn't say that Herakul actually did that. बल्कि इब्न नतुर की रिवायत की बिना पर उसके अरकान के मशवरा देने का जिक्र करते हैं. On the contrary, the narration that was brought in relation to Ibn Natur only indicated that the Senate were giving that particular advice. और बिल्कुल करीन कियास है कि उन्होंने अपनी जहनी मालूमात और जहन्नत की बिना पर ऐसा मशवरा दिया हो. And it is quite very much sensible or logical that they had given that particular advice based on what is already on their mind, the type of experience or they were having, or the type of things they already learned and has become part of their lifestyle. So for that reason, they gave that particular advice. The content still continues, and we'll be looking into the remainder of it in future, inshallah. Right now, we have exhausted the time we stipulated for the program. So, in brief, if anyone has anything to add or remove, or if there's any question in relation to this section of the commentary of Sahih Bukhari we've taken today, it can be presented within the next 30 seconds. Otherwise, we bring the class to an end. Jazakumullah khairan. Okay, in the absence of none, I now bring the class to an end. Jazakumullah khairan. May Allah the Almighty keep each and every one of us safe, and we meet again next time, inshallah. Till that time, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.